All right. Today we are going to read through chapter 22 of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. This is not just going to be a straight reading through of all the words. We will stop and talk about interesting vocabulary words, the meaning of words and phrases that are not clear. So this is a really good way to improve your English vocabulary if you're learning English and you want some advanced vocabulary. Also a good way to just practice in general. We learn interesting phrases and terms that you may not learn in a classroom. If you're watching this live with me, I want to remind you that I encourage you to ask questions about words that you find curious or phrases that you don't quite understand. If you don't ask questions, I will just select words that I think are interesting or that I think you think might find interesting. But I think it's much better if you ask questions while we're doing this. Don't think that you're interrupting me. I want you to ask questions if you have any. Okay. Now, in the last chapter, Davy and Steerforth, his old school friend, had arrived in, Yarmouth, where he was visiting some people from his childhood. And that's where we left off. So let's continue reading to see what happens. The title of this chapter is Some Old Scenes and Some New People. Steerforth and I stayed for more than a fortnight in that part of the country. Fortnight means 2 weeks. Fort is short for 14. 14 nights, 2 weeks. So they stayed there for 2 weeks. We were very much together, I need not say, but occasionally we were asunder for some hours at a time. So asunder means apart, but it isn't a very common word to be using in modern English. He was a good sailor, and I was but an indifferent one. And when we went out boating with Mr. Peggotty, which was a favorite amusement of his, I generally remained ashore. My occupation of Peggotty's spare room put a constraint upon me from which he was free, for knowing how assiduously she attended on Mr. Barkis all day. Let's take a look at that word, assiduous. Showing great care or perseverance. Now, that's not a very common word. I guess you could use it now if you wanted to, maybe to impress someone, but it's not a very common word. So I generally remained ashore. My occupation of Peggotty's spare room put a constraint upon me from which he was free, for knowing how assiduously she attended on Mr. Barkis all day. So Peggotty took very good care of Mr. Barkis, her husband, who was very sick. I did not like to remain out late at night, whereas Steerforth, lying at the inn, had nothing to consult but his own humor. Thus it came about that Mr. Peggotty's house of call, the willing mind, after I was in bed, that's weird, and on his being afloat, wrapped in fisherman's clothes, whole moonlight nights, and coming back when the morning tide was at flood. Oh, we have to read that again. Thus it came about that I heard of his making little treats for fishermen at Mr. Peggotty's house of call, the Willing Mind, after I was in bed. So maybe the Willing Mind is the name of a pub or something like that, his house of call. And Steerforth was very generous and bought people drinks and things like that. That's how it sounds. I'm not sure if that's what it means, but that's how it sounds. Thus it came about that I heard of his making little treats for the fishermen. So he was maybe buying the fishermen drinks at Mr. Peggotty's house of call, the place where Mr. Peggotty always went. The Willing Mind. That's kind of an interesting name for a pub. after I was in bed, and of his being afloat, wrapped in fisherman's clothes, while whole moonlight nights, and coming back when the morning tide was at flood. So they would stay out all night. By this time, however, I knew that his restless nature and bold spirits delighted to find a vent in rough toil and hard weather, as in any other means of excitement that presented itself freshly to him. So none of his proceedings surprised me. So Davy knew that Steerforth, according to Steerforth's character, he enjoyed the excitement of being on the boat and the hard work. And then he includes, as he does with anything the first time he tries it. So I think Davy understands that he enjoys it, but only temporarily. And he won't enjoy it for much longer. And plus, because he's staying at the inn, the little hotel, alone, he gets bored. And this is a way for him to not be bored. Davy does not get bored because he's staying at Peggotty's house, and there's always something to do or talk about. And plus, he doesn't want to leave her alone for too long. Another cause of our being apart, sometimes being apart, was that I had naturally an interest in going over to Blunderstone and revisiting the old familiar scenes of my childhood, while Steerforth, after being there once, had naturally no great interest in going there again. Hence, on 3 or 4 days that I can at once recall, we went our several ways after an early breakfast, and met again at a late dinner. I had no idea how he employed his time in the interval, beyond a general knowledge that he was very popular in the place. He had 20 means of actively diverting himself, where another man might not have found one. So Davy likes to go visit his old childhood home at Blunderstone, and which, of course, Steerforth would find boring. So there were several days when they had breakfast together and didn't see each other again until dinner. But Steerforth had become very popular in the town, and Davy understood that there were many ways that he could enjoy himself. And he's comparing that to a normal person. If a normal person had been accompanying Davy, maybe he would be bored and wouldn't find even one thing to do. But according to Davy, Steerforth seemed to always have 20 things to do. For my own part, my occupation in my solitary pilgrimages was to recall every yard of the old road as I went along it, and to haunt the old spots. We were talking about that word haunt earlier today. You know, haunt is what a ghost does. When a ghost stays in a house or a room or an area, we say that the ghost haunts that area. You know, they stay there and they scare people. They refuse to go away. I think haunt, one of the main ideas of haunt is they refuse to go away. To haunt the old spots, Davy's going to Blunderstone where he grew up, and he's haunting the old spot. He's staying there like a ghost, just sort of standing around, looking around. When you haunt a place, you're just staying there doing nothing, really. And sometimes you refer to the places where you used to go when you were younger as your old haunts. What did you do this weekend? I went to the town where I grew up. What did you do there? I went to my old haunts. That means I went to the old places where you could always find me before. It's a pretty common term, actually, to use haunt in that way. As my memory had often done, and lingered among them as my younger thoughts had lingered when I was far away, the grave beneath the tree where both my parents lay, on which I had looked out, And when it was my father's only, with such curious feelings of compassion, and by which I had stood so desolate. Desolate means like abandoned. And when it was open to receive my pretty mother and her baby, the grave which Peggotty's own faithful care had ever since kept neat and made a garden of, I walked near by the hour. So Peggotty would visit the grave of his mother, and she would keep it nice and neat, and she planted a little garden there to make it look beautiful. It lay a little off the churchyard path, in a quiet corner, not so far removed, but I could read the names upon the stone. As I walked to and fro, we've had that phrase before, to and fro, means going from one point and then walking to another point and then returning, going back and forth, to and fro, just like back and forth. It's a very common term. I walked to and fro, startled by the sound of the church bell when it struck the hour, for it was like a departed voice to me. My reflections at these times were always associated with the figure I was to make in life, and the distinguished things I was to do. My echoing footsteps went to no other tune, but were as constant to that as if I had come home to build my castles in the air at a living mother's side. There were great changes in my old home, the ragged nests. Do you know the word rag? Let me show you what a rag is, in case you don't know what that is. So we're talking about the noun rag. And let me show you some pictures here. Rags are like old clothes, like this. You see, when clothes become, when you can't wear the clothes anymore, when they have holes or something like that, you can start to use them for washing. And then they're rags. So usually when you see the word rag, it means like an old piece of clothes. It's no good anymore. Oh, it's only good for washing things, not for wearing. If somebody is dressed in rags, let's take a look at what that means, dressed in rags. So you can see this person is dressed in rags. These are rags, wearing rags. This guy's dressed in rags. So what do you think it means if you describe something as ragged? In very bad condition, maybe falling apart. Let's see, what were they calling ragged here? Where did it go? There were great changes in my old home. The ragged nests. So the birds' nests looked abandoned, like they hadn't been lived in a long time. So long deserted by the rooks were gone, and the trees were lopped and topped out of their remembered shapes. So nobody was maintaining the trees, and they looked very uneven and untaken care of, unlike when he was growing up there. They were taken care of very well. The garden had run wild. Half of the windows of the house were shut up. It was occupied only by a poor lunatic gentleman. Lunatic means crazy. And the people who took care of him. He was always sitting at my little window, looking out into the churchyard, and I wondered whether his rambling thoughts ever went upon any of their fancies that used to occupy mine. Oh, Still Waters says, good morning. Hi, Still Waters. Thanks for joining again. Nice to see you again. Okay, the word rambling means going from place to place with no particular direction, not having a goal or a destination. So when you're rambling through the country or rambling down the road, you don't really have a destination. You're just going from place to place without thinking about it. And when you use rambling to refer to talking, he was rambling on and on. That means he was talking about different subjects. It didn't make very much sense. He had no point to what he was saying. That's what it means when somebody is rambling. And you're talking about speaking and not traveling. So he was always sitting at my little window, looking out onto the churchyard, and I wonder whether his rambling thoughts ever went upon any of the fancies that used to occupy mine. So this crazy old man lives in Davy's old house and looks out of his bedroom window at the church, and Davy thinks, I wonder if the same thoughts that I had when I was a little boy looking out the window, I wonder if this crazy old man sometimes has the same ideas or same thoughts. On the rosy mornings when I peeped, to peep is to take a little look, peeped out of that same little window in my night clothes and saw the sheep quietly feeding in the light of the rising sun. Our old neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Graper, were gone to South America, and the rain had made its way through the roof of their empty house. So their old neighbors left and moved to South America, and now the house is abandoned. And he's saying that the rain made its way into the house. So that must mean that the roof is damaged. And the rain is damaging the entire house, the inside of the house. And stained the outer walls. Mr. Chillip was married again to a tall, raw-boned, high-nosed wife. And they had a weazen little baby. Weazen. We have to look up that word. Weazen. I've never seen that before. Sharp, withered, wizened, thin, sharp, withered, wizened. So I guess thin would be the best one. So, I guess maybe babies are usually a little bit fat. They call that baby fat. But not this one. So maybe he looked sick. With a heavy head that it couldn't hold up. So the baby was maybe very skinny and weak looking, and his head was very big. So the head was so big that the baby couldn't hold up his or her head. And 2 weak staring eyes with which it seemed to be always wondering why it had ever been born. I guess it's a sad, sick, weak little baby. It was with a singular jumble of sadness and pleasure. A jumble is like a mix. Things are mixed up and confused. So with a singular mix-up and confusion of sadness and pleasure, that I used to linger about my native place until the reddening winter sun admonished me. Admonish, that's like, stop it. Don't do that. That it was time to start on my returning walk. So when the sun was going down or going up? It doesn't say, probably going down. So when the sun was going down enough, that was time. That was telling Davy, stop looking out the window. Go do something. But when the place was left behind, and especially when Steerforth and I were happily seated over our dinner by a blazing fire, it was delicious to think of having been there. So it was, though, in a softened degree, when I went to my neat room at night, and turning over the leaves of the crocodile book, which was always there upon a little table, remembered with a grateful heart how blessed I was in having such a friend as Steerforth, such a friend as Peggotty, and such a substitute for what I had lost as my excellent and generous aunt. My nearest way to Yarmouth in coming back from these long walks was by ferry. It landed me on the flat between the town and the sea, which I could make straight across, and so save myself a considerable circuit by the high road. So when Davy would return, he would actually take a boat back to Yarmouth instead of going by road. It was more convenient. Mr. Peggotty's house being on that waste place, and not 100 yards out of my track, I always looked in as I went by. Steerforth was pretty sure to be there expecting me, and we went on together through the frosty air and gathered fog towards the twinkling lights of town. One dark evening, when I was later than usual, for I had that day been making my parting visit to Blunderstone. To part means to go away, to say goodbye. So if Davy is making his parting visit to Blunderstone, that means his last visit. He's saying goodbye to Blunderstone. This will be the last time he sees it, at least during this visit to Yarmouth. As we were now about to return home, let me read that again. One dark evening, when I was later than usual, for I had that day been making my parting visit to Blunderstone, as we were now about to return home, I found him alone in Mr. Peggotty's house, sitting thoughtfully before the fire. He was so intent upon his own reflections that he was quite unconscious of my approach. So on one of their last days in Yarmouth, Davy went to Mr. Peggotty's house to see Steerforth. Steerforth was all alone, just sitting looking at the fire, like he was thinking about something very carefully. And he was so concentrated in his thinking, he didn't even see Davy coming. He didn't even know that Davy was in the room. So he was thinking about something very serious, or very deeply. This, indeed, he might easily have been, if he had been less absorbed, for footsteps fell noiselessly on the sandy ground outside. But even my entrance failed to rouse him. To rouse someone, it's like to make them awake. So even the footsteps of him walking towards Steerforth didn't rouse him, didn't wake him up from his thinking. I was standing close to him, looking at him, and still, with a heavy brow, he was lost in his meditations. This is your brow right here. If you have a heavy brow, maybe it's because you're thinking. You're thinking something very serious. He gave such a start when I put my hand upon his shoulder that he made me start too. You came upon me, he said, almost angrily, like a reproachful ghost, like an angry ghost. So you approached me, you came to me in the way an angry ghost would. I was obliged to announce myself somehow, I replied. So Davy's saying, what do you want me to do? How am I supposed to let you know I'm here? No, he answered, no. Oh, wait. Have I called you down from the stars? So Davy's saying, have I called you down from the stars? Because Steerforth was in outer space, somewhere in the universe. And Davy says, have I called you down from the stars? No, he answered, no. Up from anywhere then? Said I, taking my seat near him. I was looking at the pictures and the fire, he returned. But you're spoiling them for me, said I. He stirred it quickly with a piece of burning wood. Okay, that's a little bit confusing. I was looking at the pictures and the fire, so maybe imagining things in the fire. But you're spoiling them for me, said I. Oh, so I think Davy is saying, now I've ruined it for you, but he's doing it in the reverse way. You are spoiling them. You made them disappear for me. As he's stirring means moving, so he's stirring the fire, maybe making the fire bigger. As he stirred it quickly with a piece of burning wood, striking out of it a train of red-hot sparks that went careering up the little chimney and roaring into the air. You would not have seen them, he returned. I detest this mongrel time, neither day nor night. How late you are. Where have you been? I've been taking my leave of my usual walk, said I. And so remember, parting means saying goodbye. Also, taking leave means saying goodbye. So when he says, I've been taking leave of my usual walk, well, maybe I've been taking leave of my usual walk. I think. Well, let's just continue with that. And I've been sitting here, said Steerforth, glancing round the room, thinking that all the people we found so glad on the night of our coming down might, to judge from the present wasted air of the place, be dispersed or dead, or come to I don't know what harm. On the first night when they arrived, everybody was so happy and celebrating that Mr. Peggotty's house was full of happiness and celebration. And it's a very big contrast to this night. I think maybe the night before they're leaving, because Steerforth is very serious and seems to be in a bad mood, and Davy is noticing this. David, I wish to God I had a judicious father these last 20 years. Judicious means a father who makes good decisions. If somebody is judicious, they make good decisions. It's related to the word judge. My dear Steerforth, what is the matter? I wish with all my soul I had been better guided, he exclaimed. I wish with all my soul I could guide myself better. So Steerforth sounds like he's thinking about making a very bad decision about something. And he knows it, but he can't help it. He's going to make a bad decision. There was a passionate dejection in his manner that quite amazed me. He was more unlike himself than I could have supposed possible. It would be better to be this poor Peggotty, or his lout of a nephew, he said, getting up and leaning moodily against the chimney-piece with his face towards the fire, than to be myself 20 times richer and 20 times wiser, and be the torment to myself that I have been in this devil's bark of a boat within the last half hour. So Steerforth is saying, I wish I could just be like the Peggottys and poor, but as smart as them, as wise as them, instead of being stupid and rich like I am. And it sounds like he just did something bad, because he's talking about something he did within the last half hour. I was so confounded by this alteration in him. Confounded means like surprised and confused at the same time. So I was so surprised and confused by this change in him. Alteration is change. That at first I could only observe him in silence as he stood leaning his head upon his hand. Or maybe like that. And looking gloomily down at the fire. Gloomily means like hopelessly or depressed, something like that. At length I begged him with all the earnestness I felt, to tell me what had occurred to cross him so unusually, and to let me sympathize with him, if I could not hope to advise him. So Davy's saying, come on, tell me what's bothering you. Before I had well concluded, he began to laugh, fretfully at first, but soon with a returning gaiety. So to fret is to worry. So if he's laughing fretfully, that's like laughing nervously. But then that fretful laugh, that nervous laugh, that worrying laugh turned into a gay laugh. Gay means happy. So his laugh changed from nervous to happy. Tut, it's nothing, Daisy, nothing, he replied. I told you at the inn in London, I'm heavy company for myself sometimes. I've been a nightmare to myself just now. Must have had one, I think. At odd, dull times, so that's like at various times of boredom. Odd means various here, like intervals, various intervals. And dull means boring. So at odd, dull times, at various times when I'm bored, nursery tales come into the memory, unrecognized for what they are. I believe I have been confounding myself. Confounding is like confused and surprised. With the bad boy who didn't care and became food for lions, and the grander kind of going to the dogs, I suppose. So he's thinking about old children's stories. What old women call the horrors have been creeping over me from head to foot. I have been afraid of myself. So Steerforth is saying, oh, I'm just bored and I have nothing to do but make myself go a little bit crazy. You're afraid of nothing else, I think, said I. Perhaps not. And yet, may have enough to be afraid of, too, he answered. Well, so it goes by. I'm not about to be hipped again. I don't know what he means by hipped here. I'm not about to be hipped again, David. But I tell you, my good fellow, once more, that it would have been well for me, and for more than me, if I had a steadfast and judicious father. Steadfast means firm, and judicious means a father who makes good decisions. His face was always full of expression, but I never saw it express such a dark kind of earnestness as earnestness means like enthusiasm or desperate. I think here it means like desperation. So I never saw it express such a dark kind of being desperate as when he said these words, with his glance bent on the fire. So he's looking at the fire, and he looks very serious and desperate. And he says, oh, I wish I had a father who made good decisions and who was very firm with me. Sounds like he did something. Something bad. So much for that, he said, making as if he tossed something light in the air with his hand. Yeah, so much for that. Doesn't matter. It didn't happen. Why, being gone, I am a man again, like Macbeth. And now for dinner. If I have not, Macbeth-like, broken up the feast with the most admired disorder, Daisy. With most admired disorder, Daisy. But where are they all, I wonder, said I. God knows, said Steerforth. After strolling to the ferry looking for you, I strolled in here and found the place deserted. Deserted means abandoned, no people. That set me thinking, and you found me thinking. The advent of Mrs. Gummidge with a basket explained how the house had happened to be empty. So suddenly Mrs. Gummidge comes in with a basket. She had hurried out to buy something that was needed against Mr. Peggotty's return with the tide, and had left the door open in the meanwhile, lest Ham and little Emily, with whom it was an early night, should come home while she was gone. So Mrs. Gummidge left to go to the market to buy something. And she left the door open because she was worried that maybe Ham or Emily might return before her and be locked out of the house. Steerforth, after very much improving Mrs. Gummidge's spirits by a cheerful salutation. Salutation means saying hello, greeting. So Mrs. Gummidge is always depressed and always in a bad mood, but somehow Steerforth he has that charm. He can make people be in a good mood. He did that by saying hello to her in a very nice, friendly, happy way. And a jocose embrace. We better look up that word, jocose. I guess it probably means happy or warm or friendly. Let's see, playful or humorous. Took my arm and hurried me away. He had improved his own spirits no less than Mrs. Gummidge's, for they were again in their usual flow. So Mrs. Gummidge coming in changed the dynamic in the room. So Steerforth said hello to her in a happy way, made her smile, made her laugh, and this brought back his normal mood. Full of vivacious conversation as we went along. And so, said he gaily, remember gay means happy, gaily, happily, we abandon this buccaneer life tomorrow, do we? So they're leaving tomorrow. So we agreed, I returned, and our place by the coach are taken, you know. Aye, there's no help for it, I suppose, said Steerforth. I've almost forgotten that there's anything to do in the world but to go out tossing on the sea here. I wish there was not. So he's just saying, I've been having so much fun doing fishing that I forgot there was anything else outside of that in the world. But now, since they're leaving tomorrow, he's being reminded that he has to go back into the world. As long as the novelty should last, said I, laughing. A novelty, when you call something a novelty, novel means new. So a novelty is something new or something different. And usually when you call something a novelty, it means like, oh, it's temporary. You're having fun and you enjoy it now because it's new and different. But in a few weeks, you'll get bored with it. And that's why Davy says, as long as the novelty should last. Because Steerforth is having fun going fishing. But in a few more weeks, he probably would hate it. And they both know that. Like enough, he returned, though there's a sarcastic meaning in that observation for an amiable piece of innocence like my young friend. Well, I dare say I'm a capricious fellow, David. Let's see if we can take that apart a little bit. As long as the novelty should last, said I, laughing. Like enough, he returned, though there's a sarcastic meaning in that observation for an amiable piece of innocence, like my young friend. Okay, Steerforth is saying, okay, yeah, that's true. You're right. I would get bored with it. You're right. But, you know, I don't like the way that you said that. Sounds to me like you're implying that I'm a superficial person. So when he says like enough, that word like means similar. Like the comment that you made is similar, very similar to me. You're right about that. Okay, though there's a sarcastic meaning in that observation. So, yeah, what you're saying is true, but the tone of your voice, the way that you're saying it, it's a little bit mean. Like you're implying that it's not just a novelty, but implying that my personality is to find something for a few weeks and really enjoy it and then abandon it. And then he says, for an amiable piece of innocence. Amiable means friendly, likable. Like my young friend. My young friend, that's Davy. So he's saying, okay, you're right. I would get bored with it. But I don't like the way that you said it. You're kind of implying that I'm the type of person who really enjoys something for a few weeks and then abandons it and forgets about it. And that's not how the kind of behavior that I would expect from you, because you're so amiable, you're so nice and kind and friendly. Well, I dare say, I'm a capricious fellow. Capricious means someone who doesn't plan things, who does things spontaneously. I just want to define that word. I don't trust my own definitions. Capricious. Given to sudden and unaccountable changes of mood or behavior. So doing things spontaneously, unplanned. So he's saying, yeah, you're right. I'm capricious. I jump from one thing to another thing in a very unpredictable way. I know I am, but while the iron is hot, I can strike it vigorously too. There's an expression which is strike while the iron's hot. Let's take a look at what that means. Okay, if you think about molding metal, molding iron, it's very important that when you make the shape of it, you have to do it when it's very hot. The more it cools down, the less you can do with it. So this expression, strike while the iron's hot, it's used in modern English now too. It means do it in the moment when it's most ready. Trying to think of an example of how you would use that. Like, imagine you're having the best day in the whole world. You get a promotion at work. You find $100 sitting in the street. Who knows what else? You have the best lunch of your life. And you walk past the store and you say, maybe I should buy a lottery ticket today. And the thing you would tell yourself is, yeah, strike while the iron's hot. This is the best day that I'll ever have. So it's a good idea to buy a lottery ticket because probably I'll win. I don't know if that makes sense. So they're not exactly saying the expression here, but they're referring to it. Let's read it again and see how it's being used. Well, I dare say I'm a capricious fellow, David. I know I am, but while the iron is hot, I can strike it vigorously too. So he's saying, when everything's good, when the iron's hot, when everything's at its best, I know how to take advantage of that. I know how to strike it the best way. I could pass a reasonably good examination already as a pilot in these waters, I think. So he's saying I could even command a boat now because I've learned so much from this experience fishing with Mr. Peggotty. A nautical phenomenon, eh? Laughed Steerforth. Nautical, whenever you see that word nautical, that means it has to do with the water, the ocean, the sea. So a nautical phenomenon, amazing person in the water. Indeed he does, and you know how truly I know how ardent you are in any pursuit you follow, and how easily you can master it. And that amazes me most in you, Steerforth, that you should be contented with such fitful uses of your power. Contented, he answered, merrily. Contented, he answered merrily. I am never contented. Contented means happy. So you think I'm happy? I'm never happy. Except with your freshness, my gentle daisy. So he says, except when I'm with you, my little friend. As to fitfulness, a fit is kind of like an explosion of behavior. So if you have a fit, you're exploding with behavior, usually negative. But to be fitful maybe means like behaving unpredictably, jumping from one thing to another thing. So as to fitfulness, as to my unpredictable behavior, I have never learnt the art of binding myself to any of the wheels on which the ixions of the days are turning round and round. So he's saying, I've never been able to attach myself permanently to one thing and concentrate on it. I missed it somehow in a bad apprenticeship, and now don't care about it. You know, I have bought a boat down here. So Steerforth actually bought a boat. What an extraordinary fellow you are, Steerforth, I exclaimed, stopping, for this was the first I had heard of it. When you may never care to come near the place again. I don't know that, he returned. I have taken a fancy to the place. At all events, walking me briskly on, I have bought a boat that was for sale. A clipper. A clipper is a type of boat. Mr. Peggotty says, and so she is, and Mr. Peggotty will be the master of her in my absence. Now, so he bought a boat, and Davy is saying, why did you buy a boat? You're never coming back here again. And Steerforth says, maybe, I like it here. And then he says, anyway, while I'm not here, Mr. Peggotty can use the boat. Now I understand you, said Steerforth. Now I understand you, Steerforth, said I, exultingly. Exulting means like praising. So he says, now I understand you, said I, exultingly. You pretend to have bought it for yourself, but you've really done so to confer benefit on him. So Davy says, okay, I understand. You bought the boat because you wanted to give a gift to Mr. Peggotty. It would be inappropriate to just give him a boat. But, he could buy the boat and say, well, I probably won't use it that much, so why don't you use it when I'm not here? I might have known as much at first, knowing you, my dear kind Steerforth. How can I tell you what I think of your generosity? Tush, he answered, turning red. The less said, the better. Didn't I know, cried I, didn't I say that there was not a joy or sorrow or any emotion of such honest hearts that was indifferent to you? Aye, he answered. By the way, in case you don't know it, that word aye, it's just an old-fashioned way of saying yes. So when you see that, aye, that means yes, yes. Yeah, he answered. Aye, he answered. You told me all that. There, let it rest. We have said enough. Afraid of offending him by pursuing the subject when he made so light of it, I only pursued it in my thoughts as we went on at an even quicker pace than before. She must be newly rigged, said Steerforth. Rigging is... Let me show you what ship rigging is. Not like it matters too much, but the word rig is used in other ways too, so it would help to know one of the ways it's used. Rigging is this. This is the rigging of the boat, all of those ropes. So when he says it must be newly rigged, it means like it needs new boat, it needs the new ropes, and it needs like new sails. The sail is the... Let's see if we can find another picture. It doesn't show any. We see the white cloth here, that's the sail. That's part of the rigging. So that you have the ship, which is permanent, and the rigging, which is temporary, that you could easily replace. So when you rig something, you fix it so you can operate it. And it's a common word. To rig something means to put all the pieces together so that it can be operated. Usually it has kind of a negative connotation. When you rig something, you're not fixing it officially. You're fixing it sort of unofficially, in your own special way. She must, and also, by the way, they used to, I don't know if they still do this, probably not, but they used to refer to ships as women. So when it says she must be newly rigged, they're using she because that's how you used to refer to boats and ships, as she. She must be newly rigged, said Steerforth, and I shall leave Littimer behind to see it done, that I may know she is quite complete. Did I tell you Littimer had come down? No? No. Oh, yes. Come down this morning with a letter from my mother. Littimer is his servant, and he's very efficient. He's a very efficient servant. Oh, yes. Came down this morning with a letter from my mother. As our looks met, I observed that he was pale, even to his lips. Pale means white in color, losing the color in your face. Though he looked very steadily at me, I feared that some difference between him and his mother might have led to his being in the frame of mind in which I had found him on that solitary fireside, and I hinted so. So, now that Davy learns that he received a letter from his mother, he's thinking, oh, that's why he was in such a strange mood sitting by the fire. And then he says, I hinted so. And to hint something is to indicate something, but not actually say it. Oh, no, he said, shaking his head and giving a slight laugh. Nothing of the sort. Yes, he has come down, that man of mine. The same as ever, I said. Oh, the same as ever, said Steerforth. Distant and quiet as the North Pole. He shall see the boat being fresh named. She's the Stormy Petrel now. Petrel. Let's see what that means. I don't know what petrol means, or petrel. Let's see. Petrol. Not petrol, like gas. Oh, it's a type of bird. Various seabirds with wings that fly from land. So let's look at what a petrel is, or examples of one. Seabirds. These are examples of petrels. The Stormy Petrel. Let's see. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Let's see if they give the phonetic pronunciation. Petrel. Yeah, petrel. Not that it matters. I've gone 50 years without knowing that word. I can go 50 more. Let's see. So he shall see the boat being fresh named. She's the Stormy Petrel now. What does Mr. Peggotty care for Stormy Petrels? I'll have her christened again. When you christen something, that's when you... Did you ever see, like, the Queen taking a bottle of champagne and hitting it against a boat? Let's see. That's when a new boat goes out for the first time. They call that the christening. And so usually what happens is you take a bottle of champagne and you hit it against the boat. And that's the traditional way of christening a boat. I don't know how that started. But so that's the first time the boat goes out, you do that. I guess maybe for good luck. What does Mr. Peggotty care for Stormy Petrels? I'll have her christened again. I'll have her christened again. So I don't know, maybe that means I'll change the name. Maybe I won't call it Stormy Petrel after all, because Mr. Peggotty doesn't care about petrels. By what name? I asked. The Little Emily. So he's saying, okay, you know what? I'm changing my mind. I'm not going to call it the Stormy Petrel. I'll rename it. I'll christen it. I'll rechristen it. The Little Emily. So named after Emily. As he continued to look steadily at me, I took it as a reminder that he objected to being extolled for his consideration. I could not help showing my face how much it pleased me, but I said little, and he resumed his usual smile and seemed relieved. But see here, he said, looking before us, where the original little Emily comes, and that fellow with her, eh? Upon my soul, he's a true knight. He never leaves her. Ham was a boat builder in these days, having improved a natural ingenuity in the handicraft until he had become a skilled workman. He was in his working dress. So Emily and Ham are coming towards them as they were talking about them. He was in his working dress, he was in his working clothes, and looked rugged enough, but manly withal, and very fit protector for the blooming little creature at his side. Indeed, there was a frankness in his face, an honesty, an undisguised show of his pride in her, and his love for her, which were to me the best of good looks, I thought, as they came towards us, and they were all matched, even in that particular. She withdrew her hand timidly from his arm as we stepped to speak to them. So timid means shy. So they were kind of walking hand in hand, but when Emily saw Davy and Steerforth, she got embarrassed and put her hand down to her side. When they passed on, after we had exchanged a few words, she did not like to replace that hand, but still appearing timid and constrained, walked by herself. I thought it was all too pretty and engaging, and Steerforth seemed to think so too, as we looked after them fading away in the light of the young moon. So they passed each other, they said hello, they said a few words, and as they walked away, Emily never grabbed his hand again. And Davy thought that was cute. Suddenly there passed us, evidently following them, a young woman who approached we had not observed, but whose face I saw as she went by, and I thought I had a faint remembrance of. She was lightly dressed, looked bold and haggard and flaunting and poor, but seemed for the time to have given all that to the wind which was blowing, and to have nothing in her mind but going after them. So after Ham and Emily passed, a woman passed, and Davy had this idea that maybe she was somebody he knew. She looked familiar to him, but he didn't know why. And she looked poor. Haggard means tired and old. So she looked tired and old. She looked haggard. What else? She was lightly dressed. Maybe she wasn't wearing very warm clothes. She looked bold. Bold is brave. And flaunting and poor, but seemed for the time to have given all that to the wind which was blowing, and to have nothing in her mind but going after them. So she was kind of chasing them. She wanted to I guess maybe talk to, or at least follow, Ham and Emily. As the dark, distant level, absorbing their figures into itself, left but itself visible between us and the sea and clouds, her figure disappeared in like manner, still no nearer to them than before. So she was following them like she was chasing them, but she never caught up to them. She always stayed the same distance. She must have it in her mind. Oh, wait. He spoke in a low... Wait. That is a black shadow to be following the girl, said Steerforth, standing still. What does it mean? So Steerforth also notices this woman is following them, but she never catches up to them. She never gets to their level. And Steerforth is saying, what is she doing? He spoke in a low voice that sounded almost strange to me. She must have it in her mind to beg of them, I think, said I. A beggar would be no novelty. Remember, novelty means something new, something interesting, temporarily interesting. So a beggar would be no novelty means a beggar would not be so unusual. It wouldn't be so strange looking. There's something strange about this. This is not new. A beggar is not new. This is new. This woman is a novelty. She's something strange and interesting. But it is a strange thing that the beggar should take the shape tonight. Should take that shape tonight. Why? I asked. For no better reason, truly, than because I was thinking, he said, after pausing, of something like it when it came by. Where the devil did it come from, I wonder? So, Steerforth is thinking, that's strange, because in my head I was thinking of like a beggar woman, and then suddenly a beggar woman comes. I think that's what he's saying. It's a little bit complicated, a little bit hard to understand. From the shadow of this wall, I think, said I, as we emerged upon the road, on which a wall was abutted. It's gone, he returned, looking over his shoulder. And ill go with it. Now for our dinner. So Davy makes a joke that she came from the shadow of the wall. And now Steerforth is observing that she's gone. And he's saying, good, fine, let's go have dinner. But he looked again over his shoulder towards the sea line glimmering afar off, and yet again, and he wondered about it. In some broken expression several times in the short remainder of our walk, and only seemed to forget it when the light of fire and candle shone upon us, sitting warm and merry at table. Littimer was there, and had his usual effect upon me. When I said to him that I hoped... Littimer is he's a very good servant. He's a very perfect person. He does everything perfectly. And it makes Davy feel uncomfortable because Davy is not perfect. And he's intimidated by the servant. So he feels very nervous around the servant, like nervous of making a mistake that the servant will see. When I said to him that I hoped Mrs. Steerforth and Miss Dartle were well, he answered respectfully and, of course, respectably, that they were tolerably well, and he thanked me, and he had sent their compliments. This was all, and yet he seemed to me to say as plainly as a man could say, "You are very young, sir. You are exceedingly young." So Davy always thinks that the servant is judging him. He's not mature or smart or experienced enough. We had almost finished dinner when, taking a step or two towards the table from the corner where he kept watch upon us, or rather upon me, as I felt, he said to his master, "I beg your pardon, sir. Miss Mocher is down here." "Who?" cried Steerforth, much astonished. "Miss Mocher, sir." "Why, what on earth does she do here?" said Steerforth. "It appears to be her native part of the country, sir. She informs me that she makes one of her professional visits here every year, sir. I met her in the street this afternoon, and she wished to know if she might have the honor of waiting on you after dinner, sir." So to wait on someone means maybe to visit them. So when Littimer was walking around in the afternoon, somebody who knows Steerforth saw him and said, "Oh, is Steerforth here?" And the servant said yes. Littimer said yes. And she said, "Do you think that I could see him after dinner to talk to him?" And so that's what she's doing now. "Do you know the giantess in question, Daisy?" inquired Steerforth. So you have the word giant, which means a big person. And Steerforth is calling this woman a giantess, which means a giant woman. It's not a very nice thing to say. So let's see what happens. "Do you know the giantess in question, Daisy?" inquired Steerforth. I was obliged to confess I felt ashamed, even of being at this disadvantage before Littimer, that Miss Mocher and I were wholly unacquainted. We didn't know each other. "Then you shall know her," said Steerforth, "for she is one of the 7 wonders of the world. When Miss Mocher comes, show her in." I felt some curiosity and excitement about this lady, especially as Steerforth burst into a fit of laughter when I referred to her, and positively refused to answer any question of which I made her the subject. So Davy is, the fact that Steerforth is referring to her as a giantess, which means that she's extremely tall and extremely big, has made Davy curious, especially after Steerforth called her one of the 7 wonders of the world. So, like, one of the 7 things in the world that no one can explain. And since that moment, Davy's been saying, well, what is this thing about her? And every time Davy asks about her, Steerforth laughs. I remained, therefore, in a state of considerable expectation until the cloth had been removed, some half an hour, and we were sitting over the decanter of wine before the fire, when the door opened, and Littimer, with his habitual serenity, quite undisturbed, announced Miss Mocher. I looked at the doorway and saw nothing. I was still looking at the doorway, thinking that Miss Mocher was a long while making her appearance, when to my infinite astonishment there came waddling round a sofa, which stood between me and it, a pursy dwarf of about 40 or 45. Okay, a dwarf is a very small person, so the opposite of a giant. Let's just take a look at what a dwarf is, in case you don't know. This is really what a dwarf is. So he was calling her a giantess, but in reality she's a dwarf. She's very, very small. Now, they refer to her as Percy, but I'm not sure what that means. Let's see, Percy. Well, let's see. Percy, short of breath, fat. So she's fat and small, probably. Let's see. Let's go back and reread that part. Oh, and waddling. We should talk about that word waddling. Let's see if I can find a picture of that. That's how a very fat person might walk. Okay, and or if you know how a penguin walks, that is a waddle. So here's a penguin walking. It's like walking, but also moving side to side to keep your balance. So the Miss Mocher is short, very short, extremely short, and fat. Thinking that Miss Mocher was a long while making her appearance, when to my infinite astonishment there came waddling round a sofa, which stood between me and it, a pursy dwarf, so a fat dwarf, of about 40 or 45, with a very large head and face, and a pair of roguish grey eyes, and extremely little arms. That to enable herself to lay a finger archly against her snub nose, as she ogled Steerforth, she was obliged to meet the finger halfway, lay her nose against it. Her chin, which was what is called a double chin, was so fat that it was entirely swallowed up the strings of her bonnet, bow and all. Okay, in case you don't know what a double chin is, I guess we better. Wellington Cardoso says, like Charlie Chaplin. Yes, Charlie Chaplin liked to waddle. Double chin. That's right. But he wasn't fat. A double chin, in case you don't know, this is a chin. And if you're pretty fat, you might have a double chin. 2 chins. This is a double chin. Throat, she had none. So this is your throat. She was so fat she didn't have a throat. She just had a big chin. Waist, she had none. So the waist is around here, around the middle part of your body. She didn't have a waist because she was really fat. Legs, she had none worth mentioning. For though she was more than a full size down to where her waist would have been, if she had any, and though she terminated, as human beings generally do, in a pair of feet, so he's saying she didn't have a waist. She had feet like everybody, but wait, let's see. Let's finish this. She was so short that she stood at a common-sized chair at a table. So when she was so short that if she walked to a regular chair, that would be like a normal person standing at a table. So she was very, very short. Let's see. I've lost my spot. I have to go back and find it. Okay, common-sized chair as a table. Resting a bag she carried on the seat. This lady, dressed in offhand, easy style, bringing her nose and her forefinger together with the difficulty I have described, standing, so she can't even really reach her nose. Standing with her head necessarily on one side, and one of her sharp eyes shut, making an uncommonly knowing face, and ogling Steerforth. Ogling is like staring at somebody, but I don't trust my definition. I want to see what Google's definition, not that you should trust that. Ogle, to eye amorously or provocatively. So to look at someone in a sexual sort of way. So she has an attraction to Steerforth. I can't do that. I don't know, but you get the idea. Okay, let's see. With one of her sharp eyes shut up, making an uncommonly knowing face and ogling Steerforth. She's looking at him with like sexual, physical desire. For a few moments, broke into a torrent of words. Torrent means like a storm. What, my flower, she pleasantly began, shaking her large head at him. You're there, are you? Oh, you naughty boy. Fie for shame. What do you do so far away from home? Up to mischief, I'll be bound. Oh, you're a downy fellow, Steerforth, you are, and I'm another, ain't I? Ha 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 ha. So she's saying, what are you doing down here? Why are you down here? Are you up to some kind of trouble? You're a naughty fellow. You're a bad boy. Naughty means bad, but in a playful, fun kind of way. So she's implying that there's a girl down here or something. Oh, you're a naughty fellow, but so am I. Ha ha ha. Okay, let's see. Ain't I? You've had bet at £100 to 5 now that you wouldn't have seen me here, wouldn't you? So she's saying you never would have believed that you would find me here, did you? Bless you, man, alive. I'm everywhere. I'm here and there, and where not, like the conjurer's half-crown and the lady's handkercher, talking of handkerchers, and talking of ladies. What a comfort you are to your blessed mother, ain't you, my dear? Boy, over one of my shoulders, and I don't say which. Oh, that's very complicated to understand. So she's saying, you're surprised to see me here. Well, why are you surprised? I go everywhere. I'm here, I'm there. I'm here and there, and where not. Like a conjurer's half-crown and a lady's handkercher. Now, a handkerchief, and I think it could just be, they used to call it handkercher. It could be she has a regional accent, but let me show you what a handkerchief is. People don't really use these very much anymore. Maybe sometimes for decoration. And so, when a man is wearing a suit and he puts maybe like a colorful one here, they call it a pocket square. But really, it's a handkerchief. And you used to use it maybe to wipe your face or your nose, to keep yourself clean. A conjurer is a magician. And so, wait, let me just get a picture here. Maybe this will make sense if we find a picture of a magician with a handkerchief. Or maybe not. I don't know. Because magic has changed quite a bit. But it used to be that a magician would take a handkerchief and then maybe put something in it, and then when he releases the handkerchief, the thing disappears. Or sometimes take the handkerchief and then open it and something appears. So that's a very common trick that a magician would do with a handkerchief. So let's go back and try to decode what this lady is talking about. Let's see. So she says, "Oh, you're surprised to see me here, aren't you? Well, don't be surprised, because I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere. I go everywhere." I'm here, I'm there, and we're not. And like a conjurer's half crown, so a half crown that would be like a coin, taking the half crown, and like a conjurer's half crown and a handkerchief, and a lady's handkerchief, disappearing or appearing is what she's implying by that. Talking of handkerchiefs, speaking of handkerchiefs, and speaking of ladies, and talking of ladies, what a comfort you are to your blessed mother, ain't you, my dear boy? Over one of my shoulders, and I don't say which. I don't really understand what she means by that last part. I just don't. Miss Mocher untied her bonnet. So a bonnet is like a woman's hat, and then it's attached under the chin, like with a little rope. So she untied her bonnet to take off her hat. At this passage of her discourse, threw back the strings and sat down, panting on a footstool in front of the fire. Panting is breathing heavily. That's panting because she's very big and small, so it takes a lot of energy for her to move. Making a kind of arbor of the dining table, which spread its mahogany shelter above her head. Arbor is another word for tree. So the leg of the table and the top of the table was kind of like a tree, giving her protection and shade. "Oh, my stars, and what's their names?" she went on, clapping a hand on each of her little knees and glancing shrewdly at me. Shrewdly means like thinking and planning. So she's looking at Davy like this. Who are you? I am too full of habit. That's the fact, Steerforth. After a flight of stairs, it gives me such trouble to draw every breath. To draw breath means to extract. Draw means extract. I know you think it means making pictures, but it also means extract. Drawing a breath. That's drawing a breath. Extracting breath. I'm too full of habit. That's the fact, Steerforth. After a flight of stairs, it gives me as much trouble to draw every breath I want. So after walking up one flight of stairs, after walking up from one floor to another floor, using the stairs, I can't breathe. As if it was a bucket of water. So trying to breathe is like trying to take in a bucket of water. If you saw me looking out of an upper window, you'd think I was a fine woman, wouldn't you? So she's saying if you were down in the street and you saw me looking out a window from very high up, you would think I was a very pretty woman. I should think that, wherever I saw you, replied Steerforth. Go along, you dog, do. So she's saying, oh, stop it. That's not true. Cried the little creature, making a whisk at him with the handkerchief. So she's got a handkerchief whisking. Go along. Get out of here. Stop that. With which she was wiping her face. So remember, the purpose of a handkerchief really is to keep yourself clean or keeping yourself look neat. So now she's using her handkerchief to wipe the sweat because she was walking and very tired. And don't be impudent, but I give you my word and honor. I was at Lady Mither's last week. There's a woman. How she wears. And Mithers himself came into the room where I was waiting for her. There's a man. How he wears. I'm not sure what they mean by wears here. And his wig, too, for he had it these 10 years, and he went on at that rate in the complimentary line, that I began to think I should be obliged to ring the bell. Ha ha ha. He is a pleasant wretch, but he wants principle. Wow, this is complicated. The way she talks is very complicated. I'm not sure when she says there's a woman, there's a man, that means like there's the perfect example of a woman. There's the perfect example of a man. But this wears, to me, that kind of means like how he makes me tired, how she makes me tired. I'm not sure if that's what she means, but that's what I think when I read it. So she likes them, she admires them for being like the perfect woman and the perfect man. Oh, there's a woman. There's a man. You can still do that in regular English. I mean, this is English from 170 or 180 years ago. People talked a little bit differently. But you could still say that like, oh, Tesla. Now there's a car. That means, oh, Tesla, that's like the perfect car. I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying that as an example. You can use that phrase to talk about this is the perfect example of something. New York. Now there's a city. That means, oh, that's like the perfect city for me. Let's reread that. So I was at Lady Mither's last week. There's a woman. How she wears. See, to me, that means like how she makes me tired. She makes me feel so tired. But I don't know. I don't know if that's really what she means here. It's kind of a contradiction. First, she's the perfect woman, but she makes me tired. I don't know. Let's see. Maybe we'll get more information. And Mithers himself came into the room where I was sitting. There's a man. How he wears. Again, I don't know. Let's see. And his wig, too, for he had it in these 10 years. So he wears a wig. He wears false hair. And he's been wearing the same wig for 10 years. And he went on at that rate in his complimentary line. And I began to think I should be obliged to ring the bell. I don't know. I'm missing something here. He went on at that rate in the complimentary line. I think, so he went on, he continued, he kept talking on that rate in the complimentary line. Maybe what she means is, Steerforth is saying, oh, you look beautiful no matter what. And she was embarrassed and she said, oh, stop it. And then she says, I saw Mithers and he did the same thing. He went on in that complimentary line. He was talking in the same way you are, in this very complimentary, very nice way. And then I began to think I should be obliged to ring the bell. To ring the bell, maybe like to ring the bell for the servant to come in and interrupt, or maybe to escort her to leave, like she was getting tired of it. It was annoying her and she wanted to leave. He's a pleasant wretch, but he wants principle. When she says, so he's a pleasant wretch. Wretch is like a horrible thing. So he's a pleasant, horrible thing. It's kind of these lines are full of contradictions. But he wants principle. Okay, that means that he doesn't have morals. He doesn't have principles. He wants principles. He doesn't have it. So he doesn't have a good character, maybe, is what she's saying. Oh, that's hard. That's really hard the way that she talks. It's hard to decode it. That's tellings, my blessed infant, she retorted, tapping her nose again, screwing up her face, twinkling her eyes like an imp of supernatural intelligence. Never you mind. You'd like to know whether I stop her hair from falling off, or dye it, or touch up her complexion, or improve her eyebrows, wouldn't you? And so you shall, my darling, when I tell you. Is she a beautician? Sounds like she's a beautician. So you want to know if I dye her hair, if I change her hair color, or what else? Touch up her complexion. Complexion is how your face looks. Does your skin look smooth? Is there a nice red color on your cheeks? That's your complexion. Is your skin too white? That's worrying about your complexion. She sounds like maybe she's a beautician. Or improve her eyebrows, wouldn't you? You want to know if I do those things, don't you? And so you shall, my darling, when I tell you. Do you know what my great-grandfather's name was? No, said Steerforth. It was Walker, my sweet pet, replied Mrs. Mowcher. And he came from a long line of walkers. He came of a long line of walkers that I inherit all the Hookey estates from. So she's giving her family history. Maybe she's not a beautician. Maybe she's very rich, because she's saying, did she say great-grandfather? My great-grandfather was a walker. So maybe that's a famous family, a famously rich family. And he came from a long line of walkers. So it wasn't just his name was Walker. His family goes back in history a very long time as Walker. That I inherit all of the Hookey estates from. So she's explaining where she gets all of her money from. That's how it sounds. Let's see. I never beheld anything approaching to Miss Mowcher's wink except Miss Mowcher's self-possession. She had a wonderful way, too, when listening to what was said to her, or when waiting for an answer to what she had to say herself, or pausing, with her head cunningly on one side, and one eye turned up like a magpie's. Altogether, I was lost in amazement, and sat staring at her, quite oblivious, I'm afraid, of the laws of politeness. So Davy is saying she's so interesting, not just that she's small and fat, but the way that she behaves, or the way that she interacts with people, you become like hypnotized by her personality. And he was so distracted by that he was just staring at her, and it was kind of rude. She had by this time drawn a chair to her side. Remember, draw means like pull or extract. It doesn't just mean making pictures. So she drew a chair to her side and was busily engaged in producing from the bag, plunging her short arm. Plunging means go down fast. Plunging her arm into the bag. Plunging her arm to the shoulder at every dive, a number of small bottles, sponges, combs, brushes, bits of flannel, little pairs of curling irons, and other instruments, which she tumbled in a heap upon the chair. So she is a beautician or something. I mean, why does she have all these different things for taking care of your appearance? From this employment she suddenly desisted, and said to Steerforth, much to my confusion, "Who's your friend?" "Mr. Copperfield," said Steerforth. "He wants to know you." "Well, then he shall," I thought. "He looked as if he did." "I thought he looked as if he did," returned Miss Mowcher, waddling up to me, bag in hand, and laughing on me as she came, face like a peach, standing on tiptoe to pinch my cheek as I sat. "Quite tempting. I'm very fond of peaches. Happy to make your acquaintance, Mr. Copperfield, I'm sure." I said that I congratulated myself on having the honor to make hers, and the happiness was mutual. Oh my goodness, how polite we are, exclaimed Miss Mocher, making a preposterous attempt to cover her large face with her morsel of a hand. So she's embarrassed or shocked, and she wants to go like this and cover her face, but she can't because her hand is so small and her face is so fat. Morsel, by the way, means like little piece. Well, that's a useful word. We should take a look at that word morsel. So if I type the word morsel to get images, what we should find are little things, little pieces of things. So let's see what kind of pictures we get. So we get little sandwiches. I wouldn't call these a morsel. Maybe that's the name on a menu. Or look at that little dessert. That's a little morsel. When you have these cookies, if you have a chip, that's a very small piece. But the morsel, these are chocolate morsels. They're much bigger. Did you have something to eat today? A morsel. That means just a little piece of food. It's a pretty common word, actually. Yeah, I would say these yellow things on the dish. I don't know what they are, but those are little morsels. Well, you get the idea. Morsel means a little piece. And let's see how they use it here. Oh my goodness, how polite we are, exclaimed Miss Mocher. Making a preposterous means ridiculous. So there's no point in her trying to cover her face with her hand. Her face is too fat, and her hand is a little morsel, is a little piece. Oh my goodness, how polite we are, exclaimed Miss Mocher, making a preposterous attempt to cover her large face with her morsel of a hand. What a world of gammon and spinach it is, though ain't it? This was addressed confidentially to us both, as the morsel of a hand came away from the face and buried her arm and all in the bag again. So she's looking in her bag for something. What do you mean, Miss Mocher? Said Steerforth. Ha ha ha! What a refreshing set of humbugs we are. To be sure, ain't we, my sweet child? Replied that morsel of a woman. So now she's a morsel of a woman. That's a fun word, morsel. Feeling in the bag with her head on one side and her eye in the air. Looking in the bag with her head on one side and her eye in the air. Look here, taking something out. Scraps of the Russian prince's nails. Prince Alphabet turned topsy-turvy, I call him. Topsy-turvy means like upside down. And it's usually used to refer to something that's chaotic. My schedule is very topsy-turvy this week. That means there's a lot of chaos in my schedule. But topsy-turvy kind of really means upside down. So I guess she's maybe a beautician, like a beautician to really famous rich people, because she's talking about fingernail clippings in her bag from the prince, a Russian prince. Prince Alphabet turned topsy-turvy, I call him, for his name's got all the letters in it, higgledy-piggledy. So his name is not Alphabet Topsy-Turvy, but to her that sounds Russian, and seems to have similar sounds. So alphabet, maybe that's like Albert something. And topsy-turvy, we know how the Russian names always have of at the end, like Romanov or something like that. So she's just making up words. So she calls him Prince Topsy-Turvy. And higgledy-piggledy, that's a very funny expression. I don't know how to define it for you, so I'm just going to ask Google to help me. But it means like doesn't make any sense or confusing. Let's see. Confusion or disorder. So, Prince Alphabet Topsy-Turvy, I call him, for his name's got all the letters in it. His name, his real name has all of those sounds in it, but she doesn't know how to pronounce it. So she calls him Alphabet turned Topsy-Turvy. Higgledy-piggledy. So it's all confused and mixed up. I don't know how to say his name. It's Higgledy-piggledy. The Russian prince, that's kind of a funny word. If you say that, especially if your first language is not English, I think people will laugh. But so it means confusing. Everything's all higgledy-piggledy. The Russian prince is a client of yours, is he? Said Steerforth. I believe you, my pet, replied Miss Mocher. Keep his nails in order for him, twice a week, fingers and toes. So she does his nails. He pays well, I hope, said Steerforth. Pays as he speaks, my dear child, through the nose. To pay through the nose means that you pay a very high price for something. Do you like my new car? Yeah, how much did it cost? Oh, I paid through the nose. That means I paid an enormous amount of money. So Steerforth says, does he pay you well, the prince, this Russian prince? Oh, yeah, he pays the way he speaks, through his nose. That means, yes, he pays a lot of money. I guess she's like the beautician of the stars. None of your close shavers, the prince ain't, you'd say, if you saw his mustachios, red by nature, black by art. Wait, let's... Pays as he speaks, my dear child, through the nose, replied Miss Mocher. None of your close shavers, the prince ain't, you'd say so? If you saw his mustachios. So the prince's normal hair color is red, but he doesn't like that. So she changes his hair color to black. Red by nature, that's his natural hair color. Black by art. I make it black. By your art, of course, said Steerforth. Miss Mocher winked. Winked assent. Assent means like agreeing. Forced to send for me, couldn't help it. The climate affected his dye. It did very well in Russia, but it was no go here. You never saw such a rusty prince in all your born days. Rust is, let me show you what rust is, in case you don't know. Oh, here's a good picture. Rust is the color that metal turns when it's exposed to the elements. This red-orange color is rust. And if somebody has, like, especially if it's a boy and he has red hair, a common nickname for him would be Rusty because of the red color. How did she use rust here? She's talking about his hair color, though. So forced to send for me, couldn't help it. So this Russian prince has gone to England, but maybe the wet weather or whatever the climate in England is that's different from Russia did something very bad to his dyed hair. So the black was going away. The climate affected his dye. Dye means like paint, but for hair dye. It did very well in Russia, but it was no go here. It didn't work here. You never saw such a rusty prince in all your born days as he was. So you could see all of his red hair. Like an old iron. And that's why you called him a humbug just now, inquired Steerforth. Oh, you're a broth of a boy, ain't you? Returned Miss Mocher, shaking her head violently. I said what a set of humbugs we were in general, and I showed you the scraps of the prince's nails to prove it. The prince's nails do more for me in private families of the genteel sort than all of my talents put together. So she uses these nails, I guess, like a trophy. Look, I have the fingernails of the Prince of Russia. That's pretty creepy, pretty weird. I always carry them and genteel means it's a way of saying gentle, but it implies like very rich, sophisticated people. So the prince's nails do more for me in private families of the genteel sort. So not the rough people in the street, but the very gentle, sophisticated, rich people. Than all my talents put together. I always carry them about. They're the best introduction. If Miss Mocher cuts the prince's nails, she must be all right. I give 'em away to young ladies. They put 'em in albums, I believe. Ha ha ha, upon my life, the whole social system, as the men call it when they make speeches in Parliament, is a system of prince's nails, said this least of women, trying to fold her short arms and nodding her large head. So I guess she's like a beautician, and the way that she gets work, one of the ways that she gets work is says, see, these fingernail clippings belong to the Prince of Russia. And these people are impressed by that. They think, oh, well, if she takes care of the appearance of the Prince of Russia, then she must be good enough for us. And she thinks it's hilarious that that she can go anywhere in society with the prince's nails. Steerforth laughed heartily, and I laughed too, Miss Mocher continuing all the time to shake her head, which was very much on one side, and look into the air with one eye, and to wink with the other. Well, well, she said, smiting her small knees and rising. This is not business. Come, Steerforth, let's explore the polar regions and have it over. She then selected 2 or 3 little instruments and a little bottle and asked, to my surprise, if the table would bear. So she asked if the table would be strong enough. Maybe she wants to... It sounds like she's going to cut his hair or do something with his hair, but she has to stand on the table because she's so small to do it. And she's saying, do you think that I could stand on this table? The table won't break? On Steerforth's replying in the affirmative, she pushed the chair against it, and begging the assistance of my hand, mounted up pretty nimbly on the top, as if it were a stage. So she asked Davy to help her up onto the table. And it kind of reminded Davy of like a little person on a stage performing. If either of you saw my ankles, she said, when she was safely elevated, say so, and I'll go home and destroy myself. So she's embarrassed, and she's saying, if either one of you saw my ankles when I was getting up on the table, I'll run home embarrassed. I did not, said I. I did not, said Steerforth. Well then, cried Miss Mocher, I'll consent to live. So she was saying, I'll go home and kill myself if you saw my ankles. And they said, no, we didn't see them. Okay, well then I'll continue living. Now, ducky, 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 come to Mrs. Bond and be killed. By the way, ducky is kind of a cute, affectionate term that you can call someone. Now, my little ducky. Okay, this is an invocation to Steerforth to place himself under her hands, who accordingly sat himself down with his back to the table and his laughing face towards me, and submitted his head to her inspection. So now she's looking at his hair. Evidently for no other purpose than our entertainment. To see Miss Mocher standing over him, looking at his rich profusion of brown hair through a large, round magnifying glass. Oh, so she's looking at it with a magnifying glass. What is she doing? Which she took out of her pocket, was a most amazing spectacle. So you have to picture Steerforth sitting, his back to the table, and there's this little woman about this tall, very fat, with a magnifying glass, inspecting his hair on his head. I have no idea why. You're a pretty fellow, said Miss Mocher after a brief inspection. You'd be as bald as a friar on top of your head in 12 months but for me. Just half a minute, my young friend, and we'll give you a polishing that shall keep your curls on for the next 10 years. So she's going to apply she's saying, if it weren't for me and my special formula, you'd be completely bald. You wouldn't have any hair. But let me get more of my secret formula, and I'll put it on your head, and for another 10 years, you'll continue to have hair. With this, she tilted some of the contents of a little bottle. Tilting is when you when you take something and you move it diagonally like this. This is tilting. So she took a bottle and she tilted it. So she poured some of the liquid onto his head. With this, she tilted some of the contents of the little bottle onto one of the little bits of flannel. Oh, flannel is like a type of cloth. I guess we better take a look at what flannel is. This is a very weird chapter. I wasn't expecting any of this. Flannel, I'm not sure if it's the material. I mean, the pattern is plaid, but I think it's more about, I'm pretty sure it's more about the material. But normally when you see flannel, it's in this checkered pattern. Oh, here's some flannel that's not checkered. So it's a type of material. So she tilted the bottle on some flannel and putting the lotion or whatever onto the flannel so that she could apply it to his head. With this, she tilted the contents of the little bottle onto one of the little bits of flannel, and again, imparting some of the virtues of that preparation to one of the little brushes, began rubbing the scalp away with both on the crown of Steerforth's head in the busiest manner I've ever witnessed, talking all the time. "There's Charlie Pyegrave, the Duke's son," she said. "You know Charlie," peeping round to his face. "You know Charlie?" Remember, peep is like a little look. "You know Charlie?" "A little," said Steerforth. "What a man he is. There's a whisker. As to Charlie's legs, if they were only a pair, which they ain't, so he only has one leg, they'd defy competition. So he's got beautiful legs. Only if he had two, that would be wonderful. He only has one. One leg for some reason. Would you believe he tried to do without me in the Life Guards, too?" "Mad," said Steerforth. So she's saying, would you believe he tried to not use my services? And Steerforth said, "Oh, that's mad. That's crazy. How could he do that?" "It looks like it, however, mad or sane he tried," returned Miss Mocher. "What does he do? But lo and behold you, he goes into a perfumer's shop and wants to buy a bottle of the Madagascar liquid." "Charlie does," said Steerforth. So maybe that's the lotion that she's using. She calls it the Madagascar liquid. And instead of trying to use her services, he tried to go into a store to buy it. I think. That's what I understand from this, but we'll see. "Charlie does, but they haven't got any of the Madagascar liquid. What is it, something to drink?" asked Steerforth. "To drink," returned Miss Mocher, stopping to slap his cheek. "To doctor his own mustachios with, you know. There was a woman in the shop, elderly female, quite a griffin, who had never even heard of it by name. 'Begging pardon, sir,' said the griffin to Charlie. 'It's not rouge, is it?' Rouge is the French word for red. And ladies used to, or they still do, they call it blush now. But rouge is the color red, a little bit of red that you put on this part of your body, the cheeks, to make your cheeks look a little bit redder, more attractive." "Rouge," said Charlie to the griffin. What the unmentionable to ears polite do you think I want with rouge?" So the old lady is saying, "Madagascar liquid, is that rouge? Do you want rouge?" And he's saying, "Why would I want rouge? That's not something only women would use." "No offense, sir," said the griffin. We have it asked by for so many names. I thought it might be." So she's saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, but when people come in and they want rouge, they use many different names. Like I said, most of the time now, people call it blush. So maybe there were many different names for it before." "Now that, my child," continued Miss Mocher, rubbing all the time, as busily as ever, is another instance of the refreshing humbug I was speaking of. I do something in that way myself, perhaps a good deal, perhaps a little. Sharp's the word, my dear boy. Never mind. Let's read that again. I do something in that way myself, perhaps a good deal, perhaps a little. Sharp's the word. Sharp means like maybe a little bit rude, a little bit too direct. So she's saying, sometimes I can be a little bit too direct, a little bit rude. In what way do you mean? In the rouge way, said Steerforth. Put this and that together, my tender pupil, returned the wary Mocher. Wary means tired. Touching her nose, put this and that together, my tender pupil. I think she's saying, figure it out. I'm not going to tell you. Work it by the rule of secrets in all trades, and the product will give you the desired result. I say I do a little in that way myself. One dowager, she calls it lip salve. Another, she calls it gloves. Another, she calls it tucker edging. Another, she calls it a fan. I call it whatever they call it. I supply it for them. But we keep up the tricks so to one another and make believe with such a face that they soon think of laying it on. All right, this is really confusing, but they're talking about something. I don't know if they're still talking about this Madagascar liquid, but she says each person has a special name for it. Euphemism. A euphemism is like a substitute word for saying something bad. You don't want to say the bad thing, so you say something else that doesn't sound so bad. Like, instead of saying I'm sick, you say I'm a little under the weather. If you say I'm sick, that sounds very strong, a little bit serious. But if you say I'm under the weather, it means the same thing, but it sounds nicer, a little bit softer. So whatever they're talking about, and I'm not sure what it is, each woman has a different name for it. Instead of calling it what it is, they have one person calls it gloves, one person calls it lip salve. They don't want to call it by its real name. They want to call it by something nice. Oh, we have Hadi here. Hi, Hadi. How are you doing tonight? Or this morning. It must be morning for you. Nighttime for me. So she says, I call it whatever they call it. I simply call it for 'em. But we keep up the tricks so to one another and make believe with such a face that they soonest think of laying it on before a whole drawing room as before me. So they don't, whatever this thing is, this beauty trick that she does, they're embarrassed even to apply it in front of her. And when I wait upon them, they'll say to me sometimes, with it on, thick, and no mistake. How am I looking, Mocher? Oh, they'd say with it on, thick, and no mistake. So they apply the makeup she gives them, very thick. It's kind of ridiculous, maybe. And they say, how am I looking, Mocher? Am I pale? Ha ha ha. Isn't that refreshing, my young friend? It's a very confusing conversation. The way that this woman talks is pretty difficult. I never did in my days behold anything like Mocher, as she stood on the dining table, intensely enjoying this refreshment, rubbing busily at Steerforth's head and winking at me over it. Ah, she said, such things are not much in demand hereabouts. That sets me off again. I haven't seen a pretty woman since I've been here, Jemmy. So she's in Yarmouth, and she says, people don't need me here. People don't want to use makeup and try to look prettier or dye their hair. No, said Steerforth, not the ghost of one, replied Miss Mocher. We could show her the substance of one, I think, said Steerforth. addressing his eyes to mine. Eh, Daisy? Yes, indeed, said I. Aha! Cried the little creature, glancing sharply at my face and then peeping round at Steerforth's. The first exclamation sounded like a question. So, I don't know. Sounded like a question put to both of us, and the second like a question put to Steerforth only. So, something like that, I guess. She seemed to have found no answer to either, but continued to rub with her hand on one side and her eye turned up as she were looking for an answer in the air, and were confident it was appearing presently. A sister of yours, Mr. Copperfield? She cried after a pause and still keeping the same lookout. I? Remember, I is just an old word for yes. Yes? No, said Steerforth before I could reply. Nothing of the sort. On the contrary, Mr. Copperfield used, or I am much mistaken, to have a great admiration for her. Why? Hasn't he now? Returned Miss Mowcher. Is he fickle? Fickle means changing your mind very easily. So I think they're thinking maybe to use Mowcher for little Emily, like maybe to hire her to make her look even prettier. And so at first, Mowcher is getting this idea, oh, you know someone who I could work with. And she says, is it your sister, Davy? Davy doesn't have a sister. And Steerforth says, no, it's somebody else. And, wait a minute. No, said Steerforth, before I could reply, nothing of the sort. On the contrary, Mr. Copperfield used, or I'm much mistaken, to have a great admiration for her. So Steerforth is saying, no, it's a girl that Davy used to really be in love with. And Mowcher says, why? Hasn't he now? Like, he doesn't love her anymore? Returned Miss Mowcher. Is he fickle? Fickle is kind of a negative word. It means changing your mind all the time. A fickle person decides one thing and then the next moment changes their mind to something else. So when you call someone fickle, it means they're always changing their mind. It's kind of annoying. So he's not in love with her now? Is Davy fickle? Oh, for shame. Did he sip every flower and change every hour until Polly his passion requited? So I guess maybe that's a saying. Did he sip every flower? Did he taste every flower and change every hour until Polly his passion requited? I don't know the last reference. Polly is a girl's name, and requited is like rejected. Maybe requited is the opposite of that. I'm thinking of unrequited. Let me check the meaning. Make appropriate return. So, did he sip every flower? Sip is like taking a little drink. That's a sip, like you sip your tea. That's sipping your tea. Did he sip every flower? So did he taste every flower? And change every hour? That's the fickle part. Until Polly his passion requited. So until Polly, the girl that he loved, accepted him or returned his love. Is her name Polly? The elfin suddenness with which she pounced upon me. To pounce is like to jump. The way that a lion jumps onto something. The way an animal attacks something. The elfin suddenness with which she pounced upon me with this question and the searching look quite disconcerted me for a moment. To be disconcerted means to feel uncomfortable. No, Miss Mowcher, I replied. Her name is Emily. Aha! She cried, exactly as before. What a rattle I am, Mr. Copperfield. Ain't I volatile? Volatile means like dangerous. Her tone and look implied something that was not agreeable to me in connection with the subject. Davy didn't like this. She was being cute and having fun, but Davy did not like any of this. So I said in a graver manner, graver means serious, that any of us had yet assumed she is as virtuous as she is pretty. She is engaged to be married to a most worthy and deserving man in her own station of life. I esteem her for her good sense as much as I admire her for her good looks. So Mocher was implying there was something bad happening, and Davy said, no, she's just a very nice girl. She's very beautiful, and she's very sensibly decided to marry an appropriate person for her. And I admire her for it. I like her for it. Well, well said, cried Steerforth. Hear, hear, hear. Now I'll quench the curiosity of this little Fatima, my dear Daisy, by leaving her nothing to guess at. She is at present apprenticed, Miss Mocher, or articled, or whatever it may be, to Omer and Joram, haberdashers, milliners, and so forth, in this town. Do you observe, Omer and Joram? The promise of which my friend has spoken is made and entered into with her cousin. Christian name, Ham. Surname, Peggotty. Occupation, boat builder, also of this town. She lives with a relative. Christian name, unknown. Surname, Peggotty. That's Mr. Peggotty, Peggotty's brother. Occupation, seafaring. That means he goes out to sea, or he's a fisherman, or he pilots a boat. Also of this town. She is the prettiest and most engaging little fairy in the world. I admire her, as my friend does, exceedingly. If it were not that I might appear to disparage her intended. Disparage maybe here means like insult. So if it were not that I might appear to insult her fiancé, her boyfriend, the man that she's going to marry, which I know my friend would not like, I would add that to me she seems to be throwing herself away. So Steerforth is saying she's so pretty and nice that I kind of think that it's a bad idea for her to marry that man. But I'm not going to say that because I don't want to insult him, especially in front of Davy. Davy wouldn't like that. I would add that to me she seems to be throwing herself away, and that I'm sure she might do better, and that I swear she was born to be a lady. Miss Mocher listened to these words, which were very slowly and distinctly spoken, with her head on one side and her eye in the air, as if she were still looking for that answer, when he ceased. Cease means stop. When he stopped talking. When he ceased, she became brisk, and again, in an instant, and rattled away with surprising volubility. Oh, and that's all about it, is it? She exclaimed, trimming his whiskers. So she's cutting his hair, or probably like maybe on the side. These are whiskers. I don't think that he has a beard or a mustache. They never mention it. So it could be this. Hadi, if I think, was that? Oh no, wait, that was somebody else. I'm sorry. Somebody was asking me, what do you call hair? Like here, this part. Like if you're a man and you have hair, just hair. Those are called sideburns. So maybe it was very popular at that time to have big sideburns. So maybe those are the whiskers that she's cutting or trimming. Trimming his whiskers with a little restless pair of scissors that went glancing round his head in all directions. Very well, quite a long story, ought to end, and they lived happily ever afterwards. Oughtn't it? Ah. What's the game at forfeits? I love my love with an E, because she's enticing. I hate her with an E, because she's engaged. I took her to the sign of the exquisite and treated her with an elopement. Her name's Emily. She lives in the East. Ha ha ha. Mr. Copperfield, ain't I volatile? Okay. Uh, to elope is to run away and be married without permission, like without the permission of your family. That was a very bad thing to do 170 years ago. That was maybe one of the worst things that you could do if you were a girl, is to run away without the permission of your family and marry some man. And I think that Mocher has picked up on, that's a phrasal verb, to pick up on something means to understand or to see something even though nobody said it. I think Miss Mocher has picked up on that Steerforth has feelings for Emily. And so she makes up this little joke. I love my love with an E, that's Emily, because she's so enticing. Enticing means very, like maybe very beautiful, very tempting. I hate her with an E because she's engaged. So I hate this girl with an E. The E stands for Emily, but also it's the beginning of the word enticing. E stands for Emily, but also I hate her because she's engaged. She's going to get married to somebody else. I took her to the sign of the exquisite and treated her with an elopement. Okay, the sign of the exquisite, I don't understand what that's supposed to mean. But the second part, these are all words that start with an E. And treated her with an elopement. I eloped with her. Her name's Emily, and she lives in the East. Ha 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 ha. So all those words start with an E. Mr. Copperfield, ain't I volatile? So volatile means like dangerous or poisonous. And she is, because she saw right away what Steerforth was thinking. Davy never saw it, but Mocher did. And she made a joke of it. And then she says, ain't I volatile? Ain't I poison? I'm like a snake. Merely looking at me with extravagant slyness and not waiting for any reply, she continued without drawing breath. There. If ever any scapegrace was trimmed and touched up to perfection, you are, Steerforth. If I understand any noddle in the word, I understand yours. Do you hear me when I tell you that, my darling? I understand yours, peeping down into his face. Now you may mizzle Jemmy, as say at court. I don't know what this Jemmy, she said that twice. Jemmy. A short crowbar used by a burglar. That's a jimmy. Force open, verb jemmy. Force open with a jimmy. Does that make any sense? Now you may mizzle Jemmy, as we say at court. And if Mr. Copperfield will take the chair, I'll operate on him. Now you may mizzle. Okay, wait, what's mizzle? I have no idea what these words are. To rain with many small drops. That sounds like drizzle. It's mizzling most of the morning. Okay, mizzle, drizzle. I guess it's the same thing. Now you may mizzle. Now you may rain. I don't know. I don't get that one. And now she's offering to cut Davy's hair. What do you say, Daisy? Inquired Steerforth, laughing and resigning his seat. Will you be improved? Thank you, Miss Mocher. Not this evening. Don't say no, returned the little woman, looking at me with an aspect of a connoisseur. A connoisseur is like an expert on something. Someone who knows how to do something. Connaît, that's a French word. It means to know. And seur means a person. So connoisseur is like a person who knows. It's like an expert. A little bit more eyebrow. Thank you, I returned, some other time. Have it carried half a quarter an inch towards the temple, said Miss Mocher. We can do it in a fortnight. No, I thank you, not at present. Go in for a tip, she urged. No, let's get the scaffolding up, then for a pair of whiskers, come. Scaffolding, by the way, she's just trying to convince him to do some work. And scaffolding is... Let's just take a look at this. It's like a structure that you put on the outside of a building so that you can work on it, maybe wash the windows or do repairs or even to build the building. And so when she says, let's get the scaffolding up, she's saying, well, let's just start now. Let's just start with the base, and later we'll fix everything. So let's just do the preliminary things. Go in for a tip. I'm not sure what that means, but I guess maybe it's like something that she wants to do to his hair or something like that. She urged, no, let's get the scaffolding up, then for a pair of whiskers, come. So she's saying, let's start building something. I have no idea what she wants to build on his face, but she wants to improve his looks somehow. I could not help blushing as I declined, for I felt we were on my weak point now. So, Davy is still very self-conscious about being young and people taking advantage of him. He's trying to be more firm and more adult, but it's really difficult for him. And she keeps pressuring him, and he's feeling very self-conscious about it because he wants people to take him seriously. So... he wants to say, no, stop it. But he's still too young and inexperienced to do something like that. But Miss Mocher, finding that I was not at present disposed for any decoration with the range of her art, and that I was for the time being proof against the blandishments of the small bottle which she held up before one eye to enforce her persuasions, she's like, come on, let's do it. Said she would make a beginning on an early day and requested the aid of my hand to descend from her elevated station. So she asked Davy to help her down off the table. Thus assisted, she skipped down with much agility and began to tie her double chin into her bonnet. The fee, said Steerforth, is... 5 bob, replied Miss Mocher. And dirt cheap, my chicken. Ain't I volatile, Mr. Copperfield? I replied politely, not at all, but I thought she was rather so. When she tossed up his 2.5 crowns like a goblin pie man, caught them, dropped them in her pocket, and gave a loud slap. That's the till, observed Miss Mocher, standing at the chair again. Till, by the way, is like a cash register. So Steerforth threw her the money, and she caught it and put it in her pocket, and she said, that's the till. That's my cash register. That's where I put my money. That's the till, observed Miss Mocher, standing at the chair again and replacing in the bag a miscellaneous collection of little objects she had emptied out of it. Have I got all my traps? It seems so. It won't do to be like Long Ned Beadwood, when they took him to church to marry him to somebody, as he says, and left the bride behind. Ha 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 ha. So she's saying, do I have all my things? I don't want to be like Ned Beadwood, who forgot his wife when he was getting married. A wicked rascal, Ned, but droll. Now, I know I'm going to break your hearts, but I'm forced to leave you. You must call up all your fortitude and try to bear it. So she's saying, I know you're going to be very sad, but I'm sorry I have to go. You're just going to have to be strong and brave and let me go. Goodbye, Mr. Copperfield. Take care of yourself, Jockey of Norfolk. How I've been rattling on. It's all the fault of you two wretches. Wretches is like horrible person, horrible thing. But, if you say it in a sweet way, it could sound sweet. You two wretches, I love you. Kind of like that. It's the fault of you two wretches. So that's a bad word, wretches, but it's not meant in a bad way here. It's meant with affection. I forgive you, Bob swore, as the Englishman said, for good night when he first learned French and thought it so like English. Bob swore, my ducks. What? Bob swore. I think because they're saying, as the Englishman said said for good night when he first learned French. So French good night is bonsoir. But when the Englishman was first learning French, he thought it sounded like Bob swore. Bob swore, as the Englishman said for good night when he first learned French. And though it's so, and that it's so like English. Bob swore, my ducks. Again, my ducks, that's like something affectionate. My little ducks. So Bob swore, my ducks. Bonsoir, my ducks. With the bag slung over her arm and rattling as she waddled away, she waddled to the door, where she stopped to inquire if she should leave us a lock of hair. Ain't I volatile, she added, a lock of hair. A lock of hair, let me show you a picture. I think we've talked about that before. A lock of hair is like this. And so maybe 200 years ago, if you were in love with someone, you would ask for a lock of hair that you could keep with you to remember that person or to be with that person. And it was a popular souvenir. Look, you have, I guess since this is a picture of Abraham Lincoln and this is some hair, this is maybe a lock of Abraham Lincoln's hair. So she's saying, shall I leave you with a lock of my hair? Implying, I know how much you love me. And I can give you this thing to remember me by, some of my hair. So she says, where she stopped to inquire if she should leave us a lock of her hair. Ain't I volatile? She added, as a commentary on this offer, and with her finger on her nose, she departed. Steerforth laughed to that degree, and it was impossible for me to help laughing too, though I'm not sure I should have done so but for this inducement. So Steerforth was really enjoying this, and he was laughing. And Davy also laughed, but he believes that he was only laughing because Steerforth was laughing, and actually that whole situation made him feel very uncomfortable. When we had had our laugh quite out, which was after some time, he told me that Miss Mocher had quite an extensive connection and made herself useful to a variety of people and a variety of ways. Some people trifled with her as a mere oddity. So trifling means like having dealings with her, having little dealings with her. So some people just dealt with her or did business with her because it was so strange. She's like a little woman, this big, and she's very fat and very weird. And some people just did business with her because it was interesting. As an oddity, odd means strange, something strange. He said, but she was shrewdly and sharply observant of anyone he knew, and as long-headed as she was short-armed. He told me that what she had said of being here and there and everywhere was true enough, for she made little darts into the provinces. She seemed to pick up customers everywhere and to know everybody. I asked him what her disposition was, whether it was all mischievous. Mischievous means like enjoying getting into trouble. So I asked her, is she the sort of person who enjoys causing problems and getting into trouble? So was she mischievous? And if her sympathies were generally on the right side of things, but not succeeding in attracting his attention to these questions after 2 or 3 attempts, I forbore and forgot to repeat them. He told me instead, with much rapidity, a good deal about her skill and her profits, and about her being a scientific cupper, if I should ever have the occasion of her service in that capacity. A cupper? I don't think that Google will have an answer for it, but let's see. Cupper. A person who engages in coffee cupping or coffee tasting. I don't think that's what's meant here. Wait, let's see. What is a cupper? A cup of tea? No. Whatever that means, I don't think that it has any... well, at least Google doesn't know what it is. Maybe it has something to do with cutting hair or dyeing hair or something like that. She was the principal theme of our conversation during the evening, and when we parted for the night, Steerforth called after over the banisters, "Bob swore," to say goodbye. So the banisters, those are like the railings going down the stairs. So as Steerforth was leaving, he looked up from the stairs and said, "Bob swore." As I went downstairs, I was surprised when I came to Mr. Barkis's house to find Ham walking up and down in front of it, and still more surprised to learn from him that little Emily was inside. I naturally inquired why he was not there too, instead of pacing in the streets. Pacing means just walking. Just, like we've talked about walking to and fro. You could also say pacing to and fro. Pacing, usually when you talk about someone pacing, they're nervous. So Ham is outside of Peggotty's house, and Emily is inside, and Davy doesn't understand why Ham is outside, and he's pacing. He's walking nervously in front of the house. "Why, you see, Master Davy," he rejoined in a hesitating manner, "Emily, she's talking to someone in here." "I should have thought," said I, smiling, "that was the reason for your being here too, Ham." "Well, Master Davy, I am in a general way, so 'twould be." So that's "so it would be." So in a general way, you're right, he returned. But looky here. So that's "look ye here." And people still use that, especially when they're annoyed. Instead of saying "look here," which is a little bit direct, people might say "looky here," which means the same thing, but it just sounds a little bit nicer, a little bit softer. Like "listen to me," or "listen to what I'm going to tell you." But looky here, Master Davy, lowering his voice and speaking very gravely. "It's a young woman, sir, a young woman that Emily knowed once, and don't ought to know no more." So maybe it's that woman that was following them. So Ham says Emily is in Peggotty's house with this young woman. It's a young woman that Emily knew when she was younger, and she shouldn't be talking to her now. When I heard these words, a light began to fall upon the figure I had seen following them some hours ago. "It's the poor worm, Master Davy," said Ham, "and is trod under foot by all the town, up street and down street. The moldo, the churchyard, don't hold any that the folk shrink away from more." The moldo. I'm not sure what that is. "It's the poor woman, Master Davy," said Ham, "and is trod under foot by all." To trod is to walk. So people walk all over her. People don't respect her. Everybody hates her and thinks bad things about her in the town. So is trod underfoot by all the town, up street and down street. The mold of the churchyard I'm not sure what that is. Something in the churchyard. The Moldo, the churchyard, don't hold any that the folk shrink away. To shrink away from someone is to move away from someone. So if she's walking down the street, people move away from her. That's how much that she has a very bad reputation for some reason. But they're saying there's something in the churchyard. I don't know what that Moldo is. There's something in the churchyard. Don't hold any that the folk shrink away from more. So maybe there's something in the churchyard that's scary, that everybody is afraid to go near, but people are more afraid to go near her. No, near her. Did I see her tonight, Ham, on the sand after we met you? Keeping us in sight, said Ham. It's like you did, Master Davy. Now that I knowed then she was there, sir, but all along of her creeping soon afterwards under Emily's little winder, when she see the light come and whispering, Emily, Emily, for Christ's sake, have a woman's heart towards me. I was once like you. Those was solemn words, Master Davy. So he's saying, yeah, that's probably the girl who was following us. I didn't even know that she was following us until much later she came very close and she whispered, Emily, Emily, help me, please. Those was solemn words, Master Davy, for to hear. They were indeed, Ham. What did Emily do? Says Emily. Says Emily. Martha, is it you? Oh, Martha, can it be you? For they had sat at work together many a day at Mr. Omer's. So they used to work together. Ah, I recollect her now, cried I, because remember, Davy thought she looked familiar. Recalling one of the two girls I had seen when I first went there, I recollect her quite well. So when Davy's mother died, he had to spend time in this business because it was in that business where they made the dress that she would be buried in and where they were making the box, the coffin that she would be buried in. And so he was a little scared boy and his mother had just died and he was sitting there watching all this happen, and there were women making clothes for his mother to be buried in, and she was one of those girls. Martha Endell, said Ham, 2 or 3 years older than Emily, but was at the school with her. I never heard her name, said I. I didn't mean to interrupt you. For the matter o' that, Master Davy replied, all's told, almost in the same words. Emily, Emily, for Christ's sakes, have a woman's heart towards me. I was once like you. She wanted to speak to Emily. Emily couldn't speak to her there, for her loving uncle was come home, and he wouldn't. No, Master Davy, said Ham, with great earnestness. He couldn't, kind-natured, tender-hearted as he is, see two of them together side by side for all the treasures that's wrecked in the sea. So she only came to them when they were very close to the house. But Emily couldn't talk to her there because even though Mr. Peggotty is the nicest man in town, maybe the nicest man in the world, even he would not permit Emily to talk to this girl. So Emily writes in pencil on a bit of paper, he pursued, and gives it to her out the winder, that's window, out the window, to bring here. Show that, she says, to my aunt, Mrs. Barkis, and she'll set you down by her fire, for the love of me, till uncle is gone out, and I can come by. And I can come. By and by, she tells me what I tell you, Master Davy, and asks me to bring her. What can I do? She don't ought to know any such, but I can't deny her when the tears is on her face. So Emily says, Ham, you have to take me to see her at Peggotty's. And Ham doesn't want to. He doesn't think that it's right that Emily should be talking to her, but he can't help it because he loves her so much. So he takes her. He put his hand to his breast of his shaggy jacket and took out with great care a pretty little purse. "And if I could deny her when the tears was on her face, Master Davy," said Ham, tenderly adjusting it on the rough palm of his hand, "how could I deny her when she give me this to carry for her, knowing what she brought it for? Such a toy as it is," said Ham, thoughtfully looking on it, "with such a little money in it, Emily, my dear." I shook him warmly by the hand, and when he put it away again, for that was more satisfactory to me than saying anything, and we walked up and down for a minute or two in silence. The door opened and Peggotty appeared, beckoning Ham. Remember, beckon means like, come here, come. So she's beckoning with her hand. She's saying, come here, with her hand. Beckoning Ham to come in. I would have kept away, but she came after me, entreating me, that's like begging me, to come in too. Even then, I would have avoided the room where they all were, but for its being a neat tiled kitchen, I have mentioned more than once, the door opening immediately into it, I found myself among them before I considered whither I was going. So Davy was uncomfortable. He didn't want to be there with them, and he tried. First, he didn't want to go in the house, but Peggotty made him come in the house, and once they were in the house, he couldn't leave the room where they were. The girl, the same I had seen upon the sands, was near the fire. She was sitting on the ground, with her head in one arm, lying on a chair. I fancied from the disposition of her figure that Emily had but newly risen from the chair, and that the forlorn head might perhaps have been lying on her lap. I saw but little of the girl's face, over which her hair fell loose and scattered, as if she had been disordering it with her own hands. But I saw that she was young and of fair complexion. Peggotty had been crying, so had little Emily. Not a word was spoken when we first went in, and the Dutch clock by the dresser seemed, in the silence, to tick twice as loud as usual. So nobody was talking or saying anything. Obviously, everyone had been crying, and there was a clock ticking, and it seemed extra loud because everybody was so quiet. "Martha wants," she said to Ham, "to go to London." "Why London?" returned Ham. He stood between them, looking on the prostrate girl with a mixture of compassion for her and of jealousy of her holding any companionship with her whom he loved so much, so well, which I've always remembered distinctly. They both spoke as if she were ill, in a soft, suppressed tone that was plainly heard, although it hardly rose above a whisper. "Better there than here," said a third voice aloud. "Martha's," though she did not move. "No one knows me there. Everybody knows me here." I think she might be pregnant and not married. "What will she do there?" inquired Ham. She lifted up her head and looked darkly round at him for a moment, and then laid it down again, and curved her right arm under her neck, as a woman in fever, or in an agony of pain from a shot, might twist herself. "She will try to do well," said little Emily. "You don't know what she has said to us." "Does he? Do they, Aunt?" Peggotty shook her head compassionately. "I'll try," said Martha, "if you'll help me away. I never can do worse than I've done here. I may do better. Oh," with a dreadful shiver. A shiver is oh, with a horrible oh. "Take me out of these streets where the whole town knows me from a child." As Emily held out her hand to Ham, I saw him put in a little canvas bag. She took it, as if she thought it were her purse, and made a step or two forward, but finding her mistake, came back to where he had retired near me, and showed it to him. It's all yourn, Emily, I could hear him say. I haven't naught in all the world that ain't yourn, my dear. It ain't of no delight to me except for you. So it seems like Ham is giving her all of his money. And he's saying it's all yours. It's all your money. I wouldn't be happy unless you're happy. So here, take all of my money. The tears rose freshly in her eyes, but she turned away and went to Martha. What she gave her, I don't know. I saw her stooping over her, putting money in her bosom. She whispered something, and she asked, was that enough? More than enough, the other said, and took her hand and kissed it. Then Martha arose, and gathering her shawl about her, covering her face with it, and weeping aloud, weeping as crying, very loud crying, went slowly to the door. She stopped a moment before going out, as if she would have uttered something or turned back, but no word passed her lips. Making the same low, dreary, wretched moaning in her shawl, she went away. As the door closed, little Emily looked at us three in a hurried manner, and then hid her face with her hands and fell to sobbing. Sobbing is very strong, loud crying. As the door closed, don't, Emily, said Ham, tapping her gently on the shoulder. Don't, my dear. You don't ought to cry so, pretty. Oh, Ham, she exclaimed, still weeping pitifully. I'm not so good a girl as I ought to be. I know I have not the thankful heart sometimes I ought to have. Yes, you have, I'm sure, said Ham. No, cried Emily, sobbing and shaking her head. I am not as good a girl as I ought to be. Not near, and still she cried, as if her heart would break. I try your love too much. I know I do, she sobbed. So she's saying, I ask too much of you. I take advantage of you too much. I am often cross to you. That means I'm often angry with you. I'm often not very nice to you. And changeable with you, when I ought to be far different. You are never so to me. Why am I ever so to you, when I should think of nothing but how to be grateful and make you happy? You always make me so, said Ham, my dear. I'm happy in the sight of you. I'm happy all day long. I'm happy in the thoughts of you. Oh, that's not enough, she cried. That's because you're good, not because I am. Oh, my dear, it might have been a better fortune for you if you had been fond of someone else, of someone steadier and much worthier than me, who was all bound up in you and never vain and changeable like me. This is a really, we're almost done. I was going to say, this is a really, really long chapter. Just a couple more pages. I'm getting tired. It's been almost 3 hours. Oh well, sometimes it happens. We're almost done. Okay. Please, Aunt, sobbed Emily, come here and let me lay my head upon you. Oh, I'm very miserable tonight, Aunt. Oh, I am not as good a girl as I ought to be. I am not, I know. Peggotty had hastened to the chair before the fire. Emily, with her arms around her neck, kneeled by her, looking up most earnestly into her face. Oh, pray, Aunt, try to help me. Ham, dear, try to help me. Mr. David, for the sake of old times, do please, try to help me. I want to be a better girl than I am. I want to feel 100 times more thankful than I do. I want to feel more. What a blessed thing it is to be the wife of a good man and to lead a peaceful life. Oh me, oh my heart, my heart. Oh, Stillwater says, please feel free to take a break. I was thinking about it, but we have one more page. So we're going to power through. Power through is when you're feeling very tired, but you're almost near the end. So you just have to try really hard and make it to the end. So we're going to power through with the last page. She dropped her face in my old nurse's breast, and ceasing this supplication is like begging, which in its agony and grief was was half a woman's, half a child's, and all her manner was, being in that more natural and better suited to her beauty, as I thought, than any manner could have been, wept silently while my old nurse hushed her like an infant. Hushing someone is like shh, shh, shh. So Peggotty is kind of holding her while she's crying, saying shh, shh, shh. That's hushing someone, making them go quiet. Okay, she got calmer by degrees, and we soothed her. Soothing means like making feel relaxed. We soothed her. We made her feel relaxed. Now talking encouragingly, and then jesting. Jesting means joking. And now jesting a little with her, until she began to smile, and then to laugh, and then to sit up, half ashamed, while Peggotty recalled her stray ringlets. So Peggotty was fixing her hair, making it look nice again, dried her eyes, and made her neat again, lest her uncle should wonder when she got home why his darling had been crying. I saw her do, that night, what I had never seen her do before. I saw her innocently kiss her chosen husband on the cheek, and creep close to his bluff form, as if it were her best support. When they went away together, in the waning moonlight, I looked after them, comparing their departure in my mind with Martha's. I saw that she held his arm with both of her hands, and she kept close to him. Okay, well, that was the end of chapter 22 of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Next time, we will read chapter 23, which is I Corroborate Mr. Dick and Choose a Profession. So that means I agree with Mr. Dick's idea and I choose a profession. So that'll be chapter 23. Well, wow, thank you everyone who stayed until the end. That was a pretty long chapter, and I can't wait to read chapter 23. I will try to do that tomorrow. I don't know. I might be very tired by then, but we'll see. Okay, well, have a good night, everyone, and I will see you next time with chapter 23 of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Goodbye.